Right, so the very last job, now that all this is doing what we want it to in terms of adding up the totals, etc., is to work out what this total figure is going to be if we have to pay VAT on it. So most customers in the United Kingdom, unless you're, in the trade, have to pay VAT on things that you purchase. So what we want to be able to do is when we put a tick in this box, it takes this total, calculates the percentage of VAT, which is around 20%, and then adds that to this to give us the final total, including the cost of VAT. Now, it's in a strange place here. You can obviously move this underneath if you want, or you can just switch these numbers around. It's entirely up to you. It works as it is, and this will give you the total. So once you've pressed this button to add everything up, you would just put this tick in this box to calculate the VAT. There's a couple of things we need to do um, to make this work, but it is fairly straightforward using an if-else statement, which is something that we used before. All right, so the first thing we need to do is define a variable, because when we put the tick in that check button and we take the tick out of that check button, we've told it that we have an on value and we have an off value. So down here on this VAT checkbox, when we set this check button up, we said it's got a value of 1 and an off value of 2. So it's a Boolean. So 1 is true, 0 is false, 1 is on, 0 is off, and so on. 1 is selected, 0 is not selected. So it's just a Boolean. But we haven't got a variable where we can store 1 and 0, which is why at the moment when we press it, nothing's really happening. So the first thing we need to do, and we can just do this at the top underneath where we've defined all our other functions, is just create a new variable. Now we already use var, we called something else var, so we can just call this var1, or we can call it check button variable or VAT variable. Again, it doesn't matter, you call them what you want as long as you've not used them before. And it's a TK object and it's called Boolean var. Okay, so I think we use string var already, and this is a similar thing. It's called Boolean var. We need to open and close the brackets, and that will now define for us a variable that will store the 1 or the 0 when we tick that box or untick that box. Okay, be careful to use a capital B and a capital bar, a capital V and a capital B. Okay, so the next bit then is to actually define the function. So we want to, as we've done with all of these, start with def, and we can just call this function whatever we want, because it makes sense to me to call it update VAT, and I've not used that already. I'm going to use update VAT, open and close the brackets, pop the semicolon in. Now we're going to use an if statement similar to what we've done before. So what we want to say is, if var1, which we just defined above, is if var1 dot get. So if we have got something in var1, then get it and do this. So if it's, now we have a label already, and we're going to update it. So we need to define a variable, and I'm going to call it VAT cost. And that variable is going to contain what's on my grand total, because I want to calculate the VAT, and I can't do that unless I know what the grand total is. So the first thing I need to do is get from that label the text that appears on it. So I'm going to grab whatever has added up to that. And the easiest way to work out VAT at 20% is just to multiply by 2 and then divide by 10. So we're just looking for 20%. Okay, so 10% twice basically. And then what I want to do is then just add that back to the grand total label. But what I'm saying here, it's a similar way, you do things in spreadsheets, is I'm saying take the grand total, multiply it by 2, divide it by 10, that will give me 20% of the total, and then add it back to the total, so it's now the total plus the extra 20%. And then we want to update that label that we created earlier on and made red, and we called it VAT added. Okay, so same as before, we config the label and we change the text that's on it to reflect this new VAT cost. So we just tell it to display the variable VAT cost, which should then display the new number. So we also need an else, because we want to tell it what to do if it isn't the case. And we just want the VAT label to remain as it is. If you don't do this, what happens is every time you tick the button, it recalculates, and then you untick it and tick it again, it recalculates, and it just keeps recalculating forever. And because it's multiplying by 2 and divided by 10 each time, the number just gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and then it's obviously inaccurate. So we need to tell it what to do if we haven't got the one, the value in the variable. We want it just to continue to display nothing, because we don't want to add VAT if the box is not ticked. So we're going to config the VAT added label and just tell it to basically reset it back to 0. Okay, like that. Okay, we need to put it in quotes so that it knows that it's text. Okay, so what we're basically saying here is create a variable, a Boolean variable, which will accept ones and zeros. If we've got the variable 1 and it has a 1 in it, then can calculate basically 20% and add it to the total, and then show us what that looks like. If we haven't got a tick in the box, so we haven't got anything in this Boolean, then basically just put the text back to 0 and don't calculate the VAT. And the only other thing we need to do is find the check list where it says value equals 0 and off value here. So what we want to do now is we need to tell it to use the variable that that we defined just a little bit earlier on. So we need to say variable equals var1 comma. Okay, so it knows now that it's got an on value of 1 and an off value of 0, and it's going to store that in variable var1. And the only other thing that we need to do is tell it to run the command when it ticks the box, and I think we called it update VAT. Okay, just double check that is indeed what I called it. Yep, update VAT, and then we run it. Okay, I'm getting no errors, so that's all good. Okay, so I've got Core i5, got NVIDIA, I've got some RAM, number of modules doesn't really matter, and then we total that gives 149. We add VAT. Ooh, and let me have a look. What's wrong with that VAT cost? I'll be honest, text times 2 plus. I didn't put the dot here. I forgot to tell it to get the text. Okay, that makes more sense. So get the text, multiply it by 2, divide it by 10, and then add it to the original text, because obviously it can't calculate uh, a label. It needs to calculate the text on the label. Hopefully that will fix that. We got that. We got that. We got some RAM. Okay. Okay. VAT cost. I did get and not C get. Easy to make these silly mistakes. Okay, so Core i5, NVIDIA, we got some RAM, we got a total, we got some VAT. Okay, so that's pretty much how that works. When you take that tick out of that box, then it zeroes it back and you're not actually paying any VAT. So the actual total always remains the same. It's just whether you want to add VAT to that total or you don't want to add VAT to that total, and that's the project finished. So if you want to add any more to this, such as the cost of cases and so on, it really is just a case of adding those in and then making sure you're updating um, the total. And it really is just a case of, if you add anything else in that you want to add into the total, you just have to define a variable for it here in the total price. So if you wanted to do a case, you would do C equals whatever the price of the label is, and then you would just do plus C in here. Okay, so if you wanted to extend this out and use the skills you've learned just to improve it and add a few more things, you can, but it is a good working project as it is, and it is good enough to meet the requirements for the exam board.